When I look at leadership and I look at both when I've held positional leadership and when I haven't, I really believe that the number one job is to raise the next generation of leaders, my age, older than me, younger than me, to be part of someone's journey as they're catalyzing change, right? Which is really how you get to these positions, is really great because man, it's every mix of emotion all in one, right? It's just incredible.
Hi, I'm Tracy Lovejoy.
And I'm Shannon Lucas. We are the co-CEOs of Catalyst Constellations, which is dedicated to empowering catalysts to create bold, powerful change in the world.
This is our podcast, Move Fast, Break Shit, Burn Out, where we speak with Catalyst executives about ways to successfully lead transformation in large organizations. And today I am thrilled to have time with Dr. Patti Fletcher. Welcome, Patti.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Likewise. Dr. Patti is renowned for her expertise in disruption and in catalyzing and sustaining large-scale transformation, is a trailblazer in gender equity and the future of work. Her career has been marked by a category creation and disruption with brands, including SAP, IBM, WorkHuman, and Limeade, which was acquired by WebMD. Congrats. Dr. Patti is currently the Chief Strategy and Practice Officer at Talentline and Chief Marketing Officer at LeapGreat, where she continues her transformative work at the intersection of people, business, technology, and data. She is the best-selling author of the book Disruptors, which I highly recommend, Success Strategies from Women Who Break the Mold, and she's a frequent keynote speaker. She holds several advanced degrees in business and organizational leadership and is a sought-after voice, both in the boardroom and in the media. So we're super lucky to have you today. Obviously, I just read like the very high level version of your journey, but we'd love to hear more about your catalytic journey, maybe sharing a few career highlights that you're proud of that help us see your catalytic nature.
I love that. And again, thanks for having me, and a huge shout out to Dan Ward, who I know you had on.
Absolutely. Thank you,
Yeah.
Dan.
Yeah. I love that guy. So, it's always interesting, isn't it, Shannon, to have someone read your bio, right? Who you are on paper, and it's supposed to impress and all that. Meanwhile, I'm still like that 12-year-old girl who grew up in small town Pembroke, Massachusetts, and can hardly believe anyone listens to me, let alone pays to work with me, right? Which is pretty crazy. So, I'm someone who, and I'm sure that the majority of your audience can identify with this, someone who really wants to live an authentic life, right? There's something inside of them that is saying, you know what, it's time to get past this whole thing around, what is your purpose? When the truth is, your life is the purpose. Where what are those callings that you're going to be able to like listen to and use what it is you have, the things you can do, the passion you have, the people in your life that can catalyze that kind of change. And not everyone's like that. I didn't realize that, Shannon, until like my 30s. That not everyone was like that, and that's okay, right? Because it's really something that is a personal journey for me. It's a wanting to make an impact on the world that I feel is positive and on the world I left behind. And it's also something I know that nobody gets to the finish line alone, and that if someone is not on part of this journey or with it, right, there's nothing wrong with that. And so for me, I am an introvert disguised as an extrovert. And most people will completely balk at that, the folks who know me, because I am out there in the world. What they don't see is me exhausted the minute that I leave. And so for me, when I think about my journey, and when I've been doing a lot of kind of soul searching, and my friend, dear friend Pramuk Jayathilik, who is the CEO and co-founder of Talentline, and that is a area, he grew up as a CHRO for big companies, Amazon, Google, Microsoft, Fidelity, right? Like, so he's been at that kind of forefront of the business of people in tech. And we're all about kind of infusing all the goodness, right, from a company perspective. But I was talking with him and he said, I think it was a saying from someone else, pretty sure, although he's a smart guy. And he said, we are who we are because of who we are. And for me, going backwards, which is something I very rarely do, but when I go backwards and look at my life and look at the themes of my life and look at my journey, it's so freaking obvious. And if you haven't done this, do it. Kind of go through specific memories of your life. And at the end, bring out what are those common themes. And my common themes are joy, which is the opposite of fear. I grew up with a very fear-based culture, right? Post-World War II, you got to get a job. It's got to be safe. You got to go do these things. And that's so limiting to me. I'm also the granddaughter of 2 genocide survivors, which really informs pretty much everything I do. The next is freedom, right? So again, genocide, you're worried everything's going to be taken away from you because literally everything has been taken away from you. The people you love, your ability to kind of make your way through the world with the money that you have. And that's really informed this kind of scarcity thing inside of me. And so the opposite, right, of that kind of being oppressed, being beholden to something outside of me that doesn't feel natural to me, that's what freedom is, right? It's that serenity, that harmony. And then the final thing is transformation. When I look at my family's history, my mom, who is the daughter of my grandparents, my mom is first generation Armenian, American, and her parents both survived the genocide. Her mother was orphaned in the genocide. Her sisters went through unimaginable things. None of them had agency at all in their lives, particularly my grandmother. And so when I look at, and yes, like most people, right, I have asked myself, what would I do if those things that happened to them happened to me? And we're kind of in a world where many of us feel it's happening. The difference between me and them are a few things. First is it didn't happen from the day I was born like it did for my grandmother. Share misfortune of being a female, right? Being born a certain religion, a certain ethnicity, a certain time when the genocide was happening. She was literally born when it was happening. The first kind of few, 1915. Um, here I am, right? Born in 1969. Yeah, the color of my skin matters in this country, but I have a big mouth and big ears, and I can't seem to shut either of them. And when I look through the themes of my life, I'm just someone who is really comfortable being uncomfortable in difficult conversations. And so my ability to transform, right, kind of condition myself continuously to get to that top of Maslow's, it's not a hierarchy, it's a steep mountain, and be content with less oxygen for self-actualization is literally the difference between me and my ancestors. And that's what my life has been like. And that's what the catalysts have been. And so for me, as I kind of, look through things and I see what brought me to where I am today, I can't help but think about like my dad, Mr. Military, Mr. If women want equal rights, you need to open your own damn doors. Meanwhile, everything he did pretty much showed he was a feminist, right? From things like making sure he was an institutional chef. He was a chef at large hospitals. And so his succession plan, he was executive chef, was always the women because they showed up, they did the hard work, right? He made sure they were paid equally and all those things because it was right. But the thing with me was I used to get in trouble for talking too much in school. And I would ask nonstop questions, and my parents would go to these, I know you're laughing because it was probably the same with you, go to these parent-teacher conferences, right? And, this is in the 1970s. It was a different school culture back then, and definitely where I grew up. And so they would say to my parents, she talks too much, she asks too many questions. And my dad would be like, good. And he'd come home and say to me, that's their job, Patty.
Nice.
Asking the questions, question authority, right? And so it really instilled those things. And my mom was a cut through the noise, told me I could do and be anything I wanted to be as long as I worked hard enough. My parents used to tell me I was going to be president or a Supreme Court justice or, replace Walter Cronkite or Peter Jennings, right? Which is really where I wanted to go because I loved investigative journalism. And so those were the things that really informed. And when I think about, you had asked about like what are some of those things that happened in your career that you're proud of that represent that? I'd say, overall being a leader, and I'm someone who's never bought into leader is a position, right? Leader is kind of a way of being. And it really has been up until this point, and I do think we need a new paradigm. We grew up going from transactional leadership, which is what we're seeing now. I give you this, you give me that, to once the knowledge worker thing really took over around transformational leadership. There is a vision. We're all going to come together. Everybody finds purpose and meaning in their work and lines their passion with their profession. And we create high performing teams that come together to achieve things that they couldn't, achieve. And your job as a leader is really to sweep the debris out of the way. That's your job. Here are the expectations, right? I trust you. Tell me what you need. I'll get the debris out of the way, even though most times it's the people who are the debris, including the person trying to make the change. And so when I look at leadership and I look at both when I've held positional leadership and when I haven't, I really believe that the number one job is to raise the next generation of leaders, my age, older than me, younger than me. I have about 10 CEOs that I've raised under my belt, countless C-suite, and probably 7 board members, maybe 10. And that
Wow.
is exciting. Yeah, to be part of someone's journey as they're catalyzing change, right? Which is really how you get to these positions is really great because man, it's every mix of emotion all in one, right? It's just incredible. And it should be hard. And when I really started focusing in on women and some of the work I did there after my PhD that I went for when I was in my 30s, still working full time, still flying around in an airplane. My younger daughter used to say that, Mommy, for a living, nobody can tell you what I do for a living. It's hilarious. But Mom, what does she do for a living? Well, she laughs on the phone, yells at her computer, and flies around on an airplane all day. Pretty freaking accurate, right? So, so when I look at all of that and I look at being a woman navigating that, when I look at the women I've worked with, we're not asking for things to be easier. We expect that they should be more fair. And we know that's equity, not equality. We're not even close to equality, right? So that's super important. And you're not going to love what I'm going to say right now because of the way that you talk about your incredible work that you do. So I'm like going to beg you to think about changing the word empower. If I
Oh,
see,
I totally agree. I read your book. Yeah. I'm with you. Please say
yeah,
what you're
yeah,
going to say, but like
yeah,
I highlighted
yeah.
in the book and you don't need to convince me. Yep.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah. And so what these women, I really just kind of go, "Ugh," right? Like, how do you help women find their voice? No, they've always had a voice. It's just none of us have been listening. They don't need to be empowered, right? Empower, as you know from the book, is if I give you power, I can also take it away. Sorry, Mr. CEO, don't empower me, enable and equip me, right? Create the right environment that's inclusive. So not that I can point at you and say you belong, but I can look in the mirror and say I belong. That's a difference, right? And that yes, things will be hard, but what can we do to ensure that they are fair? Really important, which brings me to the next two things. So the first is the impact that, right, I've been able to have in helping folks that probably would have gotten there anyway, right? So it's pretty cool to be able to do that and hear back from them really nice things about the difference that was made. That was pretty cool. But the other two pieces really relate to what I just said, and that has been my deep fascination with leadership overall, which is ultimately, who has power, who gets to keep the power, who gets to wield the power. That's pretty much everything that we go through in life, why we have wars, right? Why people get fired, why there are no women in the boardroom, all that's informed there. And those two other things are, of course, the book, which was a feat all on its own. And the other was the work that I got to be part of at SAP years and years ago. A few of us got together. I was one of the leaders, and we did some really deep research, understanding the key decision points along a human being's life cycle in business to understand where their power could be most hindered or harnessed when it came to their direct relationships, right? People don't leave a job, they leave a boss. That was a brand new concept back then. And this thing called a nudge was brand new, right? And so we were using, at the time, training machine learning. AI as we know it today didn't exist. So we were trying to train on different phrases, different words, all of that to nudge a manager along those key decision points, starting from who applies all the way to who leaves and why, right? And everything in between, to not blame and shame them. A lesson I learned the hard way, doesn't work as much as I try. But instead to have the machine really kind of bring it back to, so when you're making this decision, how does it align with that, blah, 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 right? So really help them kind of do this thing that stops unconscious bias in its traps. And it's called decision interruption. You and I are as biased as they come. It's the human condition. And that's a whole other set of podcasts we can talk about and what that looks like and how did we get here. But instead, this really isn't blame and shame. It's, hey, kind of let me use the machine to take a step back and really kind of question the why. We get so focused in our world on the what people think, when the truth is it's about how they think and why they think that way, which is why I love having a PhD and not just being a business executive, right? That research science piece also helps as a marketer to have that. And then the other piece is that book. And, when you read probably the book, is it the epilogue or the prologue, the things at the end? Oh my God. Anyway,
Yeah.
when you,
Yep.
epilogue, when you read that, it's not funny. I'm 55 people. When you read that at the end, and I don't know if you did, but it really captures why I wrote this book. And so very quickly for folks, so the story at the end is about Chris Bojalian. He's a famous novelist. He's obviously Armenian. We Armenians look for anyone whose last name ends in IAN or YAN, and we come and find each other because we're like 0.007% of the population. We get to stick together. And everyone's been impacted by the genocide, who walks this earth if they're Armenian. So anyway, he talks about being on a book tour and he's in Armenia. My people are not from Armenia. They're from Turkey, Armenia, but that's our homeland. He's in Armenia and he is about to leave this place. Oh God, I can't remember the name of it, like Sarankush or something. It's one of the locations where it was Turkey. It's one of the locations where the soldiers came and they would march people to their death off this cliff. And nobody talks about it. You can't talk about the genocide when you're there. So, because it didn't happen, right? So anyway, so he's there and he and his van full of support people are about to leave. And this man comes running at them and says, don't leave. I want you to come meet my mother-in-law. Okay, fine. So they follow this guy, windy roads down a village, and they meet this woman. I think she's in her mid to late 90s, very, very old. And he meets her. And they realize it was never about them meeting her. It was about her meeting them because Shannon, she thought she was the last Armenian on earth. It turns out she was the infant she was being held by her mom. Her dad was already killed and they were about to be pushed off the cliff. And this Turkish soldier, which happened a lot, was like, she's beautiful. I'm going to marry her, and raised this child as his own. And this was their grandchild, or sorry, this was their son. Yeah, this was their son. This was their daughter's husband, excuse me. And, I just love that inside this family, they knew that they were Armenian. Usually they didn't, but this woman thought she was the last one on earth, and that was perfect. I have spent a lifetime, I know you have, I know other women have, heck, I know men and non-binary people who think things, who see things that people don't relate to, they don't understand, and they think they're the only ones. And the truth is there is more of us than there are of us. So those are my three things. It's all been about, aligning back to the change.
Amazing. Like just haunting the stories. I guess I would love to sort of pivot into the next question, because you end up calling the people disruptors and you're like, we're not alone. We're out there. How do you connect what you learned about disruptors with the concept of catalyst, and how has that supported you on your journey?
Yeah, I think catalyst is what you need to create the disruption. And so these are both words that get thrown around, right? So, and especially disruption, which has been synonymous with innovation. And I'm also just going to say I grew up in tech. So I think it's probably the same in other industries,
Yeah.
right? But I know it's more deep seated, and we all want to be, the black sheep in that family. We all want to be the rebel and wear a hoodie and stuff. Kidding on that last one. But anyway, so what that means, right? So for me, disruption had three distinct components. I've now added a fourth. So when you go to the Silicon Valley, which is absolutely, and in the book, I call it a meritocracy, right? Hiring, not a meritocracy. I'm
Right.
hiring someone who looks like me, thinks like me. That's the majority of the corporate world, which is really a shame. So when we go to the Silicon Valley, the startup capital, which again, another topic, and we see what they believe makes a great disruption, a great startup. They say, okay, it's going to be more efficient. It's going to cost less money, take less time. And you know what? They're right. That's important, whether it's a business thing or it's a personal thing. I don't want to waste money or time. I don't have it, right? I can replace money. I can't replace my time. The next piece is effective, achieves what you want it to achieve. Makes perfect sense. Otherwise, why would I be engaging? Why would I be buying? Why would I be spending time and money doing it? And then they kind of stop right there. Disruption, from my perspective, is when you see a status quo that absolutely is inefficient. Too much time, too much money, ineffective, doesn't achieve what the whole purpose is that you wanted it to achieve. Usually in Silicon Valley, it means we're going to give you the solution and forget what the word solution means. There's a problem. Okay, fine. And then, which is a problem when only tech folks and not domain folks get involved.
Mhm.
And then the piece I add on is equitable, positively impacts the greatest number of people, not reaches the largest number of users. People might sign on once. They are not going to come back if it doesn't positively impact, right?
Mm.
Component,
Mhm.
that's a product, that's a technology, it doesn't matter. And I've recently added on, because I have some new thoughts on leadership models that I've been working on and will continue to work on over the years. And that is economic, meaning not only does it fuel the company inside, but it impacts positively the economy and the communities in which it serves.
Mhm.
That is informed by women, specifically the last two.
Mhm.
Equity, because it's all about relationships, isn't it? It's all about culture. And women are relational in our decision making. Men are more transactional. We can talk about that if we want. The last piece is economic. Women reinvest 90% of what they make into the communities around them. Jobs, right? Funding, charities, libraries, whatever that might be. And so when we think about what is the impact that I can make as a disruptor, it's not just my little fiefdom within an industry, it's actually the world around us. And that's needed. We need new skills, right? We know World Economic Forum, 33% of the skills that exist today will be obsolete within the next 3 years. 89% of us have to upskill within the next 3 years, right? There's that. It also does make me think about new types of leadership models that have to happen. So when I think about things around being a catalyst, I think, okay, so what am I a catalyst for? Well,
Mhm.
our leadership models today are still largely based on scarcity. In order for me to win, you have to lose, and vice versa, even in transformation, right?
Mhm.
What about abundance? Why can't we all win, right? And I don't mean everybody gets a trophy. Like I'm not into that. I mean that we all figure out how to bring awesomeness in the world. When my sales go down, yes. Can I turn them around? You sure can, right? Absolutely. But how are we more inclusive so that we can do that? And then, therefore, is there a new triple bottom line, right? Which requires a catalyst. So, right now, people absolutely do return for their investors, right? Public, private, it doesn't matter. Some folks have added on to additional things, happy customers, happy employees as their triple bottom line. For me, I see the only way we catalyze a future where the best innovations come, where the most people can win. Absolutely, you can build wealth, but not at the cost of others. And why should you want to? Is that if we are able to use catalyst, get moving, it doesn't matter if it's the right foot or the wrong foot. It literally, you don't know what you can do until you start. And that is toward a new leadership triple bottom line. in which companies see themselves as citizens of the globe because that's what they are. They're the most important because they have the most money. And they are focused in on one, humanity. What is their contribution to things like the climate, about equity, making sure 8 billion people, are skilled, have what they need, because it's only going to help your business, and more money will flow through. The next is innovation. Doesn't have to be tech, right? But are we doing things that are more efficient, more effective, more equitable? And then the final thing is the economy. Like it or not, money flows through. World Economic Forum, as elitist as they are, they're the one organization that really helps us understand, going back to where is the power, who has the power, who gets to wield it, because they track how money flows through. We can't do those things without catalyzing, and not everybody can wait for an event to catalyze, right? Some of us are the event. I don't think you can have both without the other. And that's one of my more grateful reasons to Dan for introducing us, because Shannon, it didn't hit me until I started reading what you do.
Amazing. Thank you. So I just have to share, this is just a personal share. My personal mission in life is to make the world's largest organizations more sustainable in every sense of the word, for people, for planet, for profit. So I totally agree. And I share that because I would love to sort of pivot into, when you were in large organizations, like clearly this is where you've landed. And you mentioned in your book, like you had your own pivot at one point, thinking about living your authentic life. And I loved also the work-life integration, because that's how I think about it, especially for women too. But so maybe what were some of the challenges as you were trying to drive positive change in the large organizations, and how did you overcome them? Because sadly, most of the world still, it's improving. Like the Business Roundtable came out with, stakeholder capitalism, et cetera. But when you're trying to go make the case for change, and some of the variables are your number one and your number two, the humanity or the innovation, not everyone inside the organization totally gets that.
Yeah. When did they come up with the stakeholder capitalism? When was that?
Oh, that's a good 2019, I think.
Yeah. So that had been around for years, right? And so the fact that it's been around for years, I'm very happy. And don't even get me started on Sheryl Sandberg and Lean In. Very happy that there are certain things that brought stuff to the mainstream that have been around a lot, or, the next, white dude who writes a book about, being inclusive or whatever. And you're just like, dude, really? It's been around for a while. And so I love that. So the reason that I'm able to work with large companies is because I've been in large companies and I've had to navigate large companies. And it goes back to power. Who gets to have it? Who gets to wield it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the way that you keep your power instead of sharing your power is by keeping people around you who want to keep you in power. When we look at concepts which really piss me off, like the queen bee syndrome, that's this misogynistic viewpoint that some women, in order to survive within organizations, have felt the need to exhibit. Other women will call this out, and I'll say, I'm so sorry you haven't been supported. There are jerks in every culture. I have had more support from women, but my question to you is, how are you supporting the women around you? Don't be so freaking entitled. So when I look at that, right, there's room for all of us, right? We have to maybe let go of the up or out. We need to remember not everybody wants to be chairperson. Some interesting data on that I can share. And so when I think about my own thing, it's been about power. It's been going back to the reason for the book, that I see things other people don't see, simply because I'm typically the only woman in the room, because I am a scholar practitioner, right? I'm never going to work in academia. God bless those people. It's never going to happen. But what I do have is I have a deep understanding at a scholarly level for different organizational models, different constructs, different leadership models. I understand very, very deeply the motivations of people, right? And how to, people want change, they don't want to change, right? I mean, that's just every leader I've ever worked with, as a catalyst, right? I know as a disruptor. And that change, people don't change when you tell them to change. They change when you enable them to change, which is why 70% of change programs or large scale transformation fails. So when I look at my own things, a few things come up, and some I have to be careful with because I've agreements are going to cause me,
Yep, understood. You can,
right?
yeah, abstract
So,
totally. Yep.
yeah, yeah. So when I think about a few things, I think about trying to get more women, working to get more women in tech, more developers. And that was as if I was murdering somebody's favorite child. It was just awful. And very like support. And then all of a sudden, when other folks pushed back, right? I think I talk about it in the book, one of the things that happened. The first things I did after my dissertation, which was a phenomenological study of women who held board of director positions, and at the time, the only tech intensive industries there were, which were tech itself and life sciences. And for me, I focus on tech. I love tech. It changes everything. Just look at our world. Who wouldn't want to be part of that? Who wouldn't want to be
Totally.
more efficient, effective, and equitable? And now every industry isn't just a tech industry. Every function isn't just a tech function, but it's now getting to be an AI industry and AI
Yep.
function, which is incredible. Just have to be responsible with that, and it's terrifying. And so I'm pretty busy. But when I look at, being a scholar, one of the things I would say to folks is take all that stuff with a grain of salt, because the majority of these people have never had to live with the decision. When
Sorry, just to take all of what stuff with a grain of salt.
all the advice that you read, all of the things you read from academics, they give you models. They can study at a very high level what the proof that they have. So and so company did these things, right? And we see it across the board. They may consult, but they've never been an operator, a C-suite operator. They've never been an employee. They do not know what it's like to be the recipient of those changes or to make those changes and have to be accountable and live with them. So I personally am very grateful that I have what I have. It also drives me crazy. So when I use that lens and I look back at the times that I've been on stage, where I've had a lot of developers, mostly male, in an audience, and I had a panel. It was in I think probably like 2009 or something. And it was at a tech conference for developers, enterprise software developers. And it was this community of a few million of them, and they vote on the topics and whatever. And
Wow.
I had a vote. We were bought our way in.
Cool.
And so we talked about getting more women into the developer world, in a community that only had 8% women, and those 8% didn't want to be that girl, right?
Totally.
So the audience turned on me. And it was pretty ugly, and the aftermath was pretty ugly. And all the dudes, all the male executives who were pro this, because it made them look great, all of a sudden went quiet, right? And it was pretty bad. And when I ended up going, and these were very influential voices who were really not great. They represented customers and partners and hundreds of millions of dollars. And I licked my wounds, right? It was like blogs were early on. I mean, it was like the early days. And I had actually, Shannon, went and found each and every one of them. And
Wow.
oh yeah, and some of them now are the best feminists I know. And that's when I learned, before Harvard came out with the research, that if a man has a daughter, everything can change, because all of a sudden he starts thinking, oh my goodness, right? My daughter is not going to have the same opportunities as someone else's sons, not their wife, not their sister, not their niece, not their family,
Totally.
right? So it was the understanding of not everybody's going to be on your side or on your topic side. And that in order to create change where people, when you're disrupting someone's status quo, you are disrupting either something they're thriving in or at least comfortable in, right? And then there are others like me that I'm like, yay, let's do it, right? And I might be someone you don't want to partner with, but you have to meet them where they are, right? You
Exactly right.
have to meet them where they are and see if you can find a catalyst for them to change. So that was awesome. The other thing I learned there, no blaming and shaming. Everything I did on that stage, they felt like I was calling them out. I have to say, that's something that I'm not happy with my response, because I started overcorrecting to make it okay. And I will say, I still have folks who try to hire me for speaking, where I'm literally told you got to make it okay for the men, and I can't do that. I can include them. I can help them be an enemy of the status quo, because allyship's not enough, but I am not going to do that. The next thing is was related somewhat to that, work that I had talked about, with using nudge, using machine learning to detect, prevent, and eventually eradicate unconscious bias. One of my favorite things I've ever worked on. Incredible team, just awesome team. And it it fizzled out, because it wasn't a corporate priority, right? After
Mhm.
years, it was a marketing thing. And so, and then I was told from a few mentors, all male, again, worked in tech, if it's so important to you to do that work, leave. Got it. So what I ended up finding out, and this is a huge lesson for catalysts, it's a huge lesson for disruptors, for people who believe they see things that others don't see. Here's the thing I have to tell you. It's kind of like that Einstein thing with the fish up the tree. You are most likely on the right stage. You're probably just in front of the wrong audience. Go
Hmm.
find that audience. In
That's
a
right.
large company, guess what? I found my audience. We were able to create the change, not just for our customers, but within the organization. Bill McDermott, right at the time, CEO of SAP, you see his name at the top of my book, right? This is a big deal. He had just released his book on leadership. So you will find, and if you don't, you have a decision to make. This is your life, your work. So bringing people along, finding your people, and then the final thing is, so I do a lot of market disruption, right? Category creation. And pretty early in my career, there was a disruption I wanted to bring to market. And I can't talk too much about it, but essentially within an existing market, I saw an opportunity. And it was a little weird, but I saw it, and it was with a potential competitor who we could partner with. This was before co-opetition was a thing. And I was so shamed. It was awful. It was terrible. And it was just terrible. And it was kind of public. And so I remember going to one of my favorite bosses, and he's like, did you socialize this? Did you, get people in the room who could talk for you? And that's when I learned that there were two things, regardless of what is kind of coming up against you. Because if you're a catalyst or a disruptor, trust me, right? You're disrupting someone's status quo, they're going to come at you. In order to succeed, you need two things. And it's so conducive to women. You need a plan. The plan has to have pivots, it has to have all that stuff. But you also need a community.
Yes.
Right? Men create networks, women create relationships, we create community. We understand, and Bill McDermott actually shared this. Not everybody is going to like change, leading it, navigating it. It's like whitewater rapids, right? Above a rock, below a rock, around a rock, not all boulders matter. The other thing is, just because people don't jump in and help your road doesn't mean they're the enemy. It simply means they have other priorities, and that's okay. Don't take them
Totally.
on, right? Don't take them
Totally.
on. And then the final thing I'll say, I hate when people ask me, like, what would you like advice would you give your younger self? My answer is always none, because I wouldn't have listened to me anyway. Um, but what I wished I knew all those years back, when I think about that room and being ridiculed and all the stuff I know about gaslight communicating and all that stuff is great. But underlying all of that was, I did grow up a working class girl, absolutely no family with any access to wealth, no connections, had, they didn't make a lot of money, right? So there's this whole world that I didn't have access to, that I was launched into. And of course, didn't go to tier one schools, didn't do all that stuff. So imposter syndrome, which a lot of women
Mhm.
talk about. And what I realized pretty quickly, thank God, was that I was focused and being conditioned to focus on the wrong thing. I was being conditioned to believe that I had to prove my worth, because that's what everyone told me. I was also told fake it till you make it, which is the worst advice you can ever give anyone. Give me a break. Um, Instead, it was simply delivering my worth. Going back to transformational leadership. Here's your job. Here are the expectations. Go for it. Let me know what you need help. If I'm focused on trying to please others and I have no idea who they are, and they probably don't know what it's going to take to please them, because the higher up in an organization, particularly large ones you go, the more you realize nobody knows what the hell they're doing. And they're just kind of, right? There's no confidence there because you're doing things you've never done before with people
Yep.
you're kind of learning, but you get more comfortable with your competence, right? I'll figure it out. And so like those things really came through, right? Around delivering your worth. All of a sudden, it's the impact, it's the efficiency, it's the effectiveness. And then the final thing is do it in a way that makes you happy. The rhythm of your day, the rhythm of your life, that's up to you. Even in an office, that's up to you.
Amen. I mean, there's not much more, there's not much more that I can say. Those are all amazing. Bring people along, find your people, create the plan, but also the ability to pivot and particularly focus on community. And we know, like, our research shows that catalysts in particular really need the community piece.
Oh yeah.
Because doing the first part, actually, the bringing people along, it's exhausting. It is the emotional labor of change.
Yeah.
If I want you to lean into change, it's on me, as you said, to not alienate or blame and shame, but even beyond that, really sense with all of my sensing capabilities what the win is for you, what's holding you back, and bring you on board, which leads to the draining. And so it's so funny because we'll get catalysts in a room and they will like show up for this 1 hour call. They'll be like, I really don't have time for this. I'm so busy. I'm so drained. And by the end, they're like, oh, I'm so recharged because the frictionless and the support that comes naturally. And the thing about the imposter syndrome is super important, the not feeling like you need to demonstrate your worth in that external way, but finding ways to, that are aligned with, I think that, when you talk about that in your book in The Pivot, and it's been really true for me too, which is just like, what is the life that I want to construct? It's always been non-traditional for me too, but it's like finding that balance that, sometimes you wobble a little bit. It's like, come back to that authentic part that you started off with at the beginning of our conversation. So
and you
thank
just
you.
reminded me, so a few things, emotional labor of change. I will quote you, but I'm
Thank
going to use the hell out of that.
you.
That
Right?
was the thing. And I love that you also said all the senses. It wasn't until I was like, I was today years old. It wasn't until last summer that I realized why everyone's like, I'm a visual learner. Never occurred. I'm a feeler. I have to feel a change. I have to
That's
feel
right.
like why the rhythm in life. So you had said, I'm learning so much here, even though I'm the one who can't seem to shut up. But when you speak, you literally just go right to the core. And I love that. See everybody, catalysts and disruptors constantly learning and feeding off each other. So now I know what it's like to
Absolutely.
be in a room with you, and I can't wait to be in another room. But you just said, you had mentioned earlier around how integration instead of balance, and you talked about balance here. And I have changed my mind a bit since this book, or I should say I've learned more. When I think about integration, back then it made perfect sense, right? Women, you and I grew up at a time, and it wasn't until I really started getting in with millennials that they changed my mind, where you're one person at work and another person at home. And that always bothered me, but that's how it was. And I never quite understood it until I hired my first super freaking star millennial, another multi CEO out of Stanford. And he said, Patti, it's weird what your generation thinks. I'd never do business with someone I wouldn't be friends with, and I'd never be friends with someone I wouldn't do business with. And I'm like, oh, I love you. I love you. But instead of balance and integration, which integration was better, that really puts your calendar at odds, right? Time is the one thing we can't replace. It's finite. And so you're constantly battling on your calendar, which is why we have all these AI tools, right? All that stuff. Why, I personally live from my calendar. And instead, it's about harmony. How is one thing I'm doing fueling the next thing I'm doing, knowing full
Nice.
well many
Nice.
things I have to do and I don't want
Right.
to. I am not an admin girl. Nobody wants me to manage anything. And if you do, good luck with that. Right. But
Uh-huh.
I can do that and experience it through suffering, or I can do that and experience it through curiosity, right? Oh my gosh, what did I find here? That's interesting. Should I really have done that? Could it have been there? Versus like, oh, I'm gonna pay the bills, right? And do my travel and expenses and all that stuff. There's just a different way. And it comes back to, and I was very grateful for SAP when I worked with them, they did so much fueling. We went from time management to energy management, right? And it was a little too new for me at the time. But all of these things are true for catalysts and for disruptors. Your life is going to be exhausting. And like my mother said, Patty, you can't help but learn the wrong way or the hard way. That's us. That's how we are,
Yep.
how we're built. And these are things that will fuel you, and you don't need to lose yourself. And
That's
you
right.
that community to remind you how supported you are, how seen you are, and that no one gets to the finish line alone.
That's right. I'm going to wrap up in a sec, but our book is like, we don't promise that you're not going to have burnout as a catalyst, but it's like, how do you minimize the amplitude and frequency of it? And paying attention, the harmony is really lovely. And I also just want to say, while the subtitle of the book for this is for women, you do have at least one call. I mean, everyone should read it. The date is amazing, but you have one call out for fathers with daughters that you like are specifically. So if you just want to jump to that, I think it's interesting for everybody. Patti, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom. This was such an amazing conversation, and I'm looking forward to the next ones.
Me too. Thank you.
And to our listening audience, thanks so much for joining us. If you'd like to learn more about how to create bold, powerful change in the world, be sure to check out our book, Move Fast, Break Shit, Burn Out, or go to our website at catalystconstellations.com. If you enjoyed this conversation as much as I did, please take 10 seconds to rate it on iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, or wherever you listen to your podcast. And of course, if you have other catalysts or disruptors in your life, hit the share button and send a link their way. Thanks again.